I'm now going to introduce our guest for Objectivist Perspectives on the Future of AI and AGI Technologies. First and foremost, please welcome to the stage Dr. David Kelley. Now, you've all already heard him speak today, but just as a quick primer, he earned his philosophy degree from Princeton in 1975 and founded the Atlas Society in 1990, serving as our executive director until 2016. A former college professor of philosophy, he has written and lectured extensively on issues in epistemology, ethics, politics, social issues, and public policy. Joining him on the stage is Peter Voss. Now, for those of you who don't know, Peter is a pioneer in artificial intelligence who in 2001 coined the term AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, with fellow AI luminaries. Peter is an engineer, scientist, and inventor, as well as a serial AI entrepreneur and leader. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. One lower round of applause for them both.
Okay, I'm going to start giving a bit of a background of AI, the history and the future of AI. So the term artificial intelligence was coined some 70 years ago now. And the original idea of AI was to build thinking machines, machines that can think, learn, and reason the way humans do. And in fact, they thought they could crack this in about 2 or 3 years, 70 years ago. Now, it obviously turned out to be a much, much, much harder problem. And so what happened over the years, over the decades, the field of AI really turned into the field of narrow AI, where you take one particular problem that requires human intelligence, and you use human intelligence to solve that particular problem using computers. Like IBM's Deep Blue, the world chess champion, and more recently, AlphaFold. Those are actually narrow AI applications. We've, of course, now over the last few years had this explosion in AI through ChatGPT, generative AI. These are called large language models. And by basically using brute force, by using massive amounts of data, an unbelievably amount of data. So for example, these current models are trained with 30 trillion words. And they number crunch them for months on end, millions of times to build this model, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of number crunching. So it's an incredibly brute force approach, nothing the way like our brain works. You know, a child can learn with a few million words to learn language and reasoning, not 30 trillion. Our brain uses 20 watts, not 20 gigawatts, not a nuclear power station. So the future of AI is artificial general intelligence, and I'll unpack that and talk about that can learn and reason incrementally as you go along. Now, let me talk a little bit about my journey of objectivism and artificial intelligence. I started out as an electronics engineer, started my own electronics company, then fell in love with software. My company turned into a software company. That turned out to be quite successful, went from the garage to 400 people, did an IPO. That was super exciting. But ultimately, that gave me the freedom to spend 5 years researching intelligence and really deeply understanding intelligence from epistemology. You know, what is reality? How do we do anything? How can we be certain of things? Studying cognitive psychology. What do IQ tests measure? How do children learn? How does our intelligence differ from animals? And what had been done in the field of AI. And objectivism really helped me a lot in many of these things. And in fact, I give the introduction to objectivist epistemology to my employees to read. Because I think the insights from Ayn Rand about concept formation, measurement omission, the importance of context, and then Rand's question, what gives rise to a concept? What need and reality gives rise to a concept, and what facts of reality give make that concept possible. Things of psychoepistemology or metacognition, basically the interaction between our subconscious and conscious thought and how we manage that. Tremendous insights. On ethics, how do we know right from wrong? I haven't found another philosopher who has such a clear explanation of the foundation of ethics and how we can tell right from wrong. And ultimately, those things are going to be very important in building an AI. For us to understand, will an artificial intelligence that can think and reason and solve problems at human level, what kind of consciousness will that have? Where does free will fit in? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that and figuring that out and basically finding out how we can transition or how can we relate human cognition to AI. So I believe we are actually very close. When you see how amazing these large language models are at summarization, the conversations you can have with them, the idea generation and so on, it really is amazing. But then you flip that over and look at the hallucinations, how they just make up stuff willy-nilly with total confidence, and that they cannot learn anything. They are read-only. Once a model is built, the model cannot learn anything new. There are very, very serious limitations to the current system. And of course, as I mentioned already, the amount of data required is just insane. 30 trillion pieces of information. I mean, you can't even put your head around that. But I think the key problem is that they cannot learn incrementally, and that's something that's not generally well understood, is whatever input you give them does not update their model. So it's as if we're having a conversation with somebody and it really makes no impression. They go away, and next time you talk to them, it's not there. Now, there is actually a consensus already building that large language models are not the way to true human-level AI. And in fact, I love quoting Jan LeCun, who's the chief scientist of Meta. He says, large language models are an off-ramp to AGI, a distraction, a dead end. And yet, billions are still pouring into this technology because there's money to be made, there's hype to be generated, there are consultants to be paid, and there is a lot of momentum in there. So we want to get back to talking about philosophy and answering questions on that, so I'll try and keep it short. So as I said, large language models are not the road to human-like thinking and reasoning ability. DARPA came up with this model a few years ago that they call the 3 waves of AI, and I think it's a good model. The first wave is what is now called good old-fashioned AI. It's what they did in the 80s and 90s, it's sort of expert systems, logic-based systems, and so on, and IBM's Deep Blue would fit into that, chess playing. And then the second wave hit us like a tsunami about 12 years ago, and that's all about big data, a lot of compute, and obviously the large companies have a lot of data, they have a lot of computing power, so that's the hammer they've got, so they try to look for nails. And that's still the wave we are surfing right now. And the third wave, according to DARPA, is really the key of intelligence is to be adaptive, to be able to learn, and in our terms it would be to form new concepts, to learn new things, to make new integrations, to truly think and reason and build new knowledge. And we call that cognitive AI. It starts with understanding what is important in human intelligence? What are the key aspects of human intelligence that we need to capture in an AI? So, these will be very kind of familiar things, is, adaptive, conceptually, incrementally, contextually. And the system needs to do it autonomously. It needs to have its own motivation to think and clarify things, to learn things, to figure things out. And it needs to have metacognition. It needs to be able to control to some degree its own thought processes, needs to be aware of its thought process. In fact, one of the one of the parts of research I did specifically related to IQ tests. What do IQ tests measure? And what I learned there is that the key to human general intelligence is metacognition. Metacognition is actually an extremely important aspect. It's our ability to think about our thinking. And an AI needs to be able to do that. So currently, large language models are totally focused on accumulating massive amounts of knowledge and skills that are captured from internet and wherever they can find them, books that they rip off and so on. So that's the red line you see there. And it doesn't matter how much money you throw at that, how fast you go, if you're going east but you really need to be going north. And north is basically this conceptual thinking, metacognitive type of building of knowledge and understanding. So it's like chalk and cheese having the two different approaches. The focus either on the amount of data versus the quality of data. The focus on having knowledge as opposed to being able to acquire knowledge. And then from a practical point of view as well, not having hallucinations and it being cost effective and so on. So it's cognitive AI that really gives us the path to human-like ability to think. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at building bigger ladders, you're not going to get to the moon. You really need different technology. So who's actually working on cognitive AI? Well, unfortunately, almost nobody. Well, I don't want to call our company nobody, but large language models and big data approaches, statistical approaches, have been so incredibly successful in so many areas in natural language understanding, translation, image recognition, and a whole host of things. That basically that's where all the action is. You want to start a new company and get funding. That's where the money goes. You want to earn big bucks. You want to get a grant. Or do a Ph.D. Really, it's the only game in town. It's sucked all of the oxygen out of the air. So at the moment, there are just very few teams actually working on cognitive AI. Now, my company, or companies over the last 20 years have alternated between developing the core technology and commercializing it, and developing it, commercializing it, and we have generated over $100 million in revenue. But really our focus is to get the core technology going. And this is where I want to really get back to objectivism and the whole idea of how AI can help us flourishing as humanity. I'll skip this slide here because it's really kind of more about the technical aspects of how we do what we do. So let me now talk about the vision of AGI, of what human-like intelligence can really achieve. And from the previous talk, we heard one of the things important in objectivism is to be able to visualize what is possible. Now, you can do that through art, but you need to have in your mind what you're aiming at and what is possible in order to achieve it. And AGI will be a total revolution. It will change everything about the way we live, and it'll give us tremendous opportunities to improve human flourishing, and of course financial opportunities as well. So let me give a few examples here. So one of them, imagine you have an AGI that can teach itself to be a cancer researcher, for example. And I say specifically teach itself because it can learn autonomously. It can hit the books and learn like a human. It doesn't need external data preparation and all that. That is the key to it. And now imagine having this PhD level cancer researcher's AI. You can now make 1 million copies of it. You have 1 million PhD level researchers chipping away at the problem. Imagine how much progress you will make. And this is true for whatever field you're talking about, whether you're talking about medical field, disease, extending life, extending health span, in energy, being able to have better, more efficient batteries, fusion technology, nanotechnology, being able to build nanobots that can go into our bodies and repair things and so on, better materials, better computers, solving the problem of quantum computing, having better food that is nutritious, that tastes good, but is also healthy for us, and growing that more effectively. These are all areas that require more brain power, more intelligence to be applied to it, which AGI can provide. Now, probably the most important thing, though, is how AGI can help us be more rational, to have a better philosophy, to develop better philosophies. Now, I was quite involved with the X-P movement many years ago, which is a philosophy that is pro-rationality, pro-science, pro-progress, and it's very much about taking personal responsibility and personal freedom, self-ownership, but self-responsibility. So I think it covers pretty much all the angles of objectivism, but in addition to it, it has a very strong focus on future technology, on futurism and technology, and how technology can help us. So I mentioned AGI researchers in every field. Obviously, it can produce a massive reduction in costs of goods and services, and improve the standard of living across the board. And then we can each have our own personal assistant, our personal AGI that we control and serves our agenda, not some mega corporations that can learn all about us and really serve as almost an exocortex, an extension of our brain, can help us think things through better and make better decisions. You can also look at it as a little angel on your shoulders to help you not make certain mistakes. So I'll end off just reminding of the benefits of computers over humans. Of course, they can be much cheaper than human labor, which is the biggest cost in most companies. They can communicate much better with each other, share information without egos getting in the way. They can work 24/7 without getting tired at full capacity. They don't have certain nice distractions that we tend to have, and of course they have like perfect memory, photographic memory. They have instantaneous access to specific information they might need on the internet, and they are much better at rational thinking than we are, because to us rationality is kind of an evolutionary afterthought which we're only just barely managing to do. So that is, I think, the future that we can imagine, and I believe that is just a few years away. Just think about it, a few years away, if the right effort goes into actually developing this technology responsibly. And I see that as the next wave of the Enlightenment, of really the Enlightenment on steroids, where we can use technology to help us produce more goods, solve more problems, and become better people. Thank you.
All right, am I live? Good. Thank you, Peter. Peter is very well versed in philosophy, especially objectivist philosophy, as well as computer science and cutting-edge research and the possibilities of artificial intelligence. I am deeply versed in philosophy, especially objectivist philosophy, and have little to zero information about high-tech, the high-tech issues he was just talking about. So we're going to focus on a common interest and common talent in philosophy. So, Stephen, we had an interesting discussion last night about all this, and I think the two issues that, from a philosophical standpoint, are most pressing are one, consciousness. Can an AGI program be conscious? And two, free will, the choice to bring. So let's take those in turn.
Okay, so the two simplest philosophical problems that we have 6-7 minutes to solve. Okay, sounds like fun. Well, I do actually have some very firm opinions on the matter, so let me try and summarize. So as far as consciousness is concerned, I prefer to use the term self-concept or self-awareness, because it kind of takes the sting out of it. An AGI's self-awareness, it has to be self-aware, it has to be aware, it has to have a concept of itself as an agent acting in the world. It has to be aware of its own thought processes to some extent through metacognition. So it has to have self-awareness. Now, that self-awareness, if you use the word self-awareness, it sort of sounds fairly reasonable, but if you use the synonym consciousness, and it suddenly sounds, well, no, they can't be conscious like we are. No, they will not be conscious the way we are, because we have the body, we have all of the emotions, we have this whole package, the sense acuity, the rich sense acuity, the history we have. So our experience of consciousness, the way we experience it, is very, very different. It's much, much richer than an AGI will have. But it has to be self-aware. It has to have a self-concept.
Okay, so one of the issues about, one of the things that does make it different, I mean, human consciousness, animal consciousness has a biological base in the brain and the entire nervous system. And that's not the understructure of AI. But I can't say that is, and how, I don't know how fundamental the truth that is, because here's this interesting thing about the objectivist epistemology. There are certain axioms. One of the axioms is consciousness. I am conscious. You can only say it from the first person standpoint. That's the only one that's an axiom. You can't refute it, you can't prove it, but if you try to deny it, you contradict yourself. However, unlike other axioms, existence and identity, consciousness does have, it is a phenomenon in the world that does have a causal basis and can be hopefully explained in various ways. So it makes it a different kind of axiom, at least from the outside, from outside observation. But there's a very clear fact about consciousness. Philosophers call it privacy. They don't mean, privacy in the political sense, the right of privacy. What they mean is you have privileged access to your, what goes on in your mind, in your conscious mind, and no one else can. You could tell someone, but even that is, the other person is learning secondhand. No other person can literally look inside your mind. That's why stories about mind reading and telepathy are so weird but fascinating. They don't, it's all BS. But so the question for AI is, in what sense would an AI, an AGI consciousness, have that same property of privacy?
Yes, I think much less so, because as an engineer we can look into that, and in fact with cognitive AI, the third wave of AI, they are not actually inherently black boxes the way large language models are. Large language models, you can't really, it's almost impossible to make sense of what they're doing internally. But with a cognitive AI approach, you actually have better access to, so the engineer could kind of look at what's happening in the brain, and that's how it would be less private. But still, for whatever the collective activation is, I don't want to call it experience of the AI, but think of it as an experience of whatever it's currently sensing, this whole complex input of sensation that it has, plus its current thought process that are active and potentially competing goals and so on that an AI will have as well. That will also ultimately be private, but it's just a very different nature. Our language doesn't really allow for it, to take words like consciousness and free will and try and apply them to them, because they are so different in this different medium. And I'll quickly talk about the second question, free will. And here I'm going to get a lot of disagreement probably from this group, is I've come to the conclusion that compatibilism is true, that determinism, properly understood, modern determinism, which is not determinable. We now know that the nature and physics are not determinable. Not in principle, not in practice, not in principle. We know that now. So determinism properly understood and volition properly understood, which I think Ayn Rand got some fundamentals wrong with that, are compatible, which means that an AGI will also have volition, which will be, again, different because it's a different consciousness, but it will know that its actions cause certain things in the world and that it is responsible for these actions. And that to me is the kind of the defining aspect of volition. And I know we spoke about that and we haven't yet quite closed the gap.
No, this is a topic, I think this goes back many years from, you've spoken at previous events in the past. No, I'm a critic of compatibilism because it's deterministic, and the problem is determinism, not the semantics or the separate understanding of what free will means. But I think, but the reason I reject the compatibilism view has to do with my view of causality. That's a more fundamental issue, and we've talked, there's something called downward emergent properties in complex systems, where an emergent property is one that emerges at a higher level of organization from the constituent parts, but then acquires new causal powers by which it can affect the very level that it arose from. This is not magic. It seems like nature is full of complex organized systems. Animals are the richest kind, and the human brain, with I don't know the number they're using now, but the last one I heard was, I think, upwards of 100 billion neurons, each of which is itself a complex little bit of stuff that will that forms into circuits, and circuits into regions, and so on and forth in unbelievable levels of complexity up to the top, which governs our gross actions and gross thoughts and gross emotions. So, Peter has that's something that we have argued about. We're running out of time. We're actually out of time. I'm over. So probably this will be erased from the tape, but it's still, you can listen. It's important. But I think that's as far as we can go in this session.
Well, we have another day and a half. We have another day and a half.
Yeah. You will be around, and free will and versus determinism is an issue that's interested me my whole philosophical life, even before I went into philosophy. And Peter's been thinking about it a long, long time too. So we're both familiar with the complexities of the issue and a lot of the arguments pro and con. So please you know, find us, push us in a corner and ask you questions outside the framework. But
Well, luckily there is time for Q&A still right now. So
Cognitive AI evolves into a tool capable of simulating autonomous reasoning, adaptation, and decision making. What are the long-term risks of exposing young generations to such systems from an early age? Do you think we could be outsourcing not just tasks, but the very development of human judgment, creativity, and moral agency?
If I understood your question, what is the risk for young people in particular of this technology? It's a good question, and I think the current large language models, ChatGPT and so, are really not a great indication, because it's the large companies that are basically trying to just monetize this and, you know, make it as engaging as possible. You are the product and so on. Now, my vision for AGI is very different, that it becomes a hyper-personalized agent. That's why I call it a personal assistant, that you own, that serves your agenda, and would be more like a Socratic help that will help you think through better and help you actually become a better person, rather than diminishing the thought. And that's why I think of it as an exocortex to the individual that will make your own ability to think and to flourish, will improve that. And I think that is a vision we should work towards, to make that happen, rather than the current trend of, you know, you have the chat companies now injecting advertising into it, you know, to monetize it. I think that's terrible. So I think we can do things to make that happen.
okay, we're going to take a question on this side over here.
Hi, good talk. Do you have advice or an opinion about how you could use AI to better understand physics or physical processes and other causal things that are otherwise not clear with our current level of technology? Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Did you understand?
How to use AI to currently understand. The question was how we can use AI to currently understand physics in ways that we currently can't process. Was that the question?
Yeah, basically.
Yes.
How does it stand in relation to?
How can we use AI to understand physics and physics equations the way that we can't currently physics, science?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that to physicists, really, because the use of AI as an instrument for calculation and research and would depend on what you're trying to figure out and what you know that can be put in as input to the machine, to the artificial system, and then, you know, what questions you're asking. I don't know of anything general. Peter, you?
Yes, well, in fact, I think, you know, one of the points that I made in my talk is having AGI, which we don't have yet. You know, currently large language models have severe limitations in that they make up stuff, and you never know when they're making up stuff. And a lot of the impressive performance they have is because it is in their training set. It's just data knowledge they have got from a training set. AGI is a completely different ballgame. It can figure out new things the way humans can figure out things. So that's when I talk about a cancer researcher or a researcher in you know, nuclear power or quantum computers. I think computers, AGI will help us understand these things better. I mean, I wish I had an AGI that could help us figure out quantum mechanics, for example, which is incredibly confusing. So if it could figure out, well, what are the aspects of, or what are the theories of quantum mechanics or physics or, you know, whatever field you're interested in, that we can rule out by systematic, good, logical thinking and potential logical thinking that is beyond our own abilities. because AGI will be able to focus much better and much longer on things than we can with our human limitations. Many years ago, I tried to figure out, I was developing a new programming language, and I tried to figure out data compression from first principles, and it almost drove me crazy. It was an overload, a mental overload that I just couldn't deal with. My brain couldn't deal with, and I said, well, I wish I had a bigger capacity to deal with abstract concepts at the same time. Crow epistemology on how many things we can have in our minds at the same time. AGIs will be able to overcome those limits. Not indefinite, they're not godlike. There will definitely be limits.
Thank you for clarifying the difference between generative AI, which is ChatGPT, and most of people are familiar with the artificial general intelligence you're talking about. Say we reach this stage when AGI is abundant, is integrated in everyone's lives, like smartphones are today. What will be left for human beings then to accomplish, and what can humans do to find meaning, fulfillment in that world?
Yes, what will be left for humans to do when AGI is available to everyone and AGI can, solve all of our problems? Well, one answer which is not entirely glib is AGIs will actually help us figure out our purpose in life. It'll be like having your own personal philosopher and psychoanalyst to help you figure that out. But in the nearer term, I think a lot of us not having to work anymore for a living, or where you have to work much less and have much more free time, I think the motivation will be to help bring this technology to everybody in the world, which is a value to many of us, to see other people flourish, to have, we want to see other people have freedom and live in a freer world. So I don't know, David?
Well, yeah, this seems to me, I'm sorry, I may be reading too much into the question, but it sounds a lot like a question that's been asked since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. These new machines that make pins, they're going to put a lot of pin makers out of business, out of work. What are they going to do? They'll be unemployed. Well, that's just a lack of imagination, because we're making pins automatically at a much lower cost now. Everyone can afford them. Society is a little richer, new jobs arise, new industries arise. And that's been going on for, at least 2 centuries, since the, actually it's closer to 3 centuries from the Industrial Revolution. And look where we are now. We have electricity. We have, people driving cars using petroleum. None of that was around in 1750. So we don't know what jobs will emerge when Peter and his colleagues make further advances, but that people, we shouldn't be blind to the fact of human invention. We will discover, and I'm sure most of us can think of things. God, I would love to have. When I had a house, I used to think, well, I could reduce the unemployment rate in New York State if I could have groundskeepers. I had 5 acres. People who would work. If I could use 20 people, save me a lot of time, but I can't afford that. Well, maybe with the increases in productivity and available time, a bunch of people who love nature would come help mow the lawn or clear brush or whatever. I don't know how it would happen, and it never did, of course. So, but this is one of the great fallacies. If I'm hearing correctly, great fallacies of economics and in in industrialism and labor.
Actually, I don't agree with that. You know, I've had a lot of debates where, you know, people saying, oh, we've had innovation all the time and we, you know, it just creates more jobs. And, you know, there's sort of an article that other people have written, I've written, this time is different. Is this time going to be different? And I believe, yes, AGI will be different, where really humans in a vast range of applications will ultimately not be worth employing, because the quality of work that the human could do versus an AGI will not be there. They will not be worth the trouble. But that doesn't mean we won't, you know, there's nothing for us to live for. I think a better way to look at it is not unemployment is a bad thing, you know, that we'll be unemployed. It's more like, doesn't everybody want to win the lottery and have the freedom to do things, other things that you want to do? AGIs are not going to have their own will and agenda to make things, to create value in the world. That's not going to be their own thing. That'll be up to us to decide what value we want to create using AGIs. So, yeah, I really do think in terms of having to work more, that new jobs will keep coming up. I think that it will be different this time.
All right, with that, we're out of time, so let's give one big round of applause. Thank you, David.
Thanks for watching. You can stay connected with all of the Atlas Society's content by hitting that subscribe button below.